Hello, lady. Today we have a very special guest in Cultivating H.E.R podcast. We actually have my new therapist here on the show, so I'm super excited for this conversation. Eve Marie is a woman that affirms daily that she is only here for God. Her passion is to live on purpose and loving, coaching, encouraging, and inspiring others to get to know, own, and accept themselves. For over 40 years, Eve Marie has been in the pursuit of peace, and today she believes that she has mastered her prescription for how to live a life of peace. On this journey, she has earned a master's degree in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University. She is a licensed marriage and family. Let me rewind that part. She is licensed in marriage and family therapy and certified in life mastery and well being coaching. Eve Marie is also the founder and executive clinical director of a faith based private practice for well being, Eve's Place of Peace. Eve Marie, welcome to Cultivating Her Space.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. We're super excited for this conversation today.
Me too.
Yes, we are. And so we are going to dive right in with our quote of the day. And Eve Marie, this quote of the day should sound really familiar to you because this is one of your words of wisdom.
Okay.
As humans, we tend to hold on to people and things we have a deep love for. Holding on in general is about us trying to have control. We hold on mostly because we don't want to feel the pain and sadness that come along with letting go. So we do whatever we can to avoid those feelings. But pain and sadness are part of our human experience. That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I
Thank
think
you.
that particular word of wisdom, it applies to our conversation today.
Yeah.
As we talk about what it is like to have a family member who has mental illness or psychological disorder, and what that really looks like in that journey to finding peace for ourselves. So are we ready to dive in?
Yes. I think I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yes.
So, Eve Marie, can you tell us a bit about your origin story and what prompted you to dive into the world of psychotherapy?
Sure, absolutely. I think for sure it's my story. It's my origin story that brought me here. And really, I always thought it was my mother who suffered from mental illness because she did from a young child and from trauma. And however, in realizing once I decided, because this is a second career for me, originally I was in human resources and I've always been an entrepreneur. And so the idea, in looking through my journals when I was going through my, I want to say midlife crisis at 40 and deciding what I want to do with the second half of my life, it was clear in my journaling that I was always engaged in helping people, through my church. Me and my husband ran small groups for couples. I had volunteered for Suicide Hotline, the Rape Crisis for Families. I had started Girls Talk for teenage girls in high school as a safe place to talk about everything, their sexuality, but just everything that young people go through. The idea, though, in reflecting in those journals, this was always my calling. And it was because as a young person, I suffered and suffered with so much shame around not having a mom or my mom not being available, And so in studying, going back, then I realized in my studies that, my father suffered too. So I had two parents that suffered with, I'm going to say, severe. Now that I am a therapist, I can say that it's both of them, severe mental illness. And really, that's why I'm here, is to help others really master who they are and how to navigate um, and heal from shame and all the other, defenses that rise up because we, have mentally ill parents or family members.
Wow. I can definitely appreciate your origin story. And I think that it's beautiful how you transition careers, but it wasn't necessarily a transition in the sense that you were already in the giving and helping
Mhm.
with others in general.
Yes.
And so, but there was one thing that you said in terms of your parents having severe mental illness. Can you tell us what is the definition of severe mental illness? Because, we know like statistics show that the majority of us will experience some level of anxiety or depression in our lives. And so, what is severe mental illness? Like, what psychological disorders would be considered severe?
Well, I think that really psychological disorders, there's a spectrum. And so there's mild, moderate, severe. And so severe is really when you are not able to really function in day to day living. You're not able to really hold a job and do what is required of you as a human being to take care of yourself. That's really severe. And I would say that both of my parents throughout my lifetime, both suffered to the extent that they couldn't take care of themselves at different points in time, let alone their children. Thank God for grandparents, right? Because they stepped in to help.
That's right. Thank God for grandparents. Gotta love them.
Yes,
So, Ingrid, can you tell us a little bit
yes.
about your words of wisdom? That's something that you really focus on in your practice. And so, can you tell us about, I guess, what inspired you to create your words of wisdom? And then, what exactly are the words of wisdom and how do they help people with powerful shifts in their lives?
Oh, absolutely. Um, while I'm going to say that I am a creative at heart, where both of my parents are creative as well, and so I've always been a writer. Like I said, I kept a journal always, just about my entire life, and so I think it was when I really, how do I put it? I guess when in again in that phase of being midlife crisis, I started really writing, and I think it was about the healing and about what was my next step, because that was a surrender on where does God want me to be. And so from there, it was really just writing every day, and it was really about peace, just living in peace. And it was designed to really help other people. And so the words of wisdom come from a place of all of my experiences. I had a client that shared with me at some point, and I loved it, and I've coined it, and I keep saying it, that my go through is for somebody else, right? And so that's what the words of wisdom really is about. It's about my go through and leveling up somebody else's life, because what I have walked myself through, now I can walk others through. And so that's what the words of wisdom are about. I'm starting a words of wisdom walk, actually, and it was a filmmaker that had encouraged me to do it. Unfortunately, couple months ago he passed away, but I'm still in the process of how could I, he said, having a romance with the camera, learning how to walk and talk and feel comfortable. And I have a partner, Doris Julie, who has always been a spiritual connective sister. And we are really, and our experiences are so different. And so just really sharing life's wisdom and the things that we've been through with other people. It really is helping others resonate and have tools, know they're not alone, release shame. That's what it really is about.
That's beautiful. I really love that. And so, how do you use the words of wisdom specifically around helping someone cope with a loved one who has mental illness and perhaps that loved one is treating them poorly?
Oh, that's so interesting. When I work with clients, whether it be in a coaching capacity or whether it be in therapy, as a woman of color, when I first started started my practice 10 years ago, we're taught in graduate school, we're this empty slate. And so, you can't really be transparent. It's client centered. People, your clients don't know anything about you. And I knew that either I had spent too much time in graduate school and I was really designed to be a coach, because I knew that was not going to be my style as it related to being transparent, because of what I knew I was bringing to the table and why. So I think that my words of wisdom come through when I'm trying to help my clients humanize the experience of being in relationship, first of all, with someone who is mentally ill, helping them understand the illness and differentiate the illness from the person. And did I answer that question? Sort of lost track.
I think so. And you made
You
me think of
did.
another question already,
Okay.
Marie. One of the things, this is a personal topic for
Okay.
me. So if you sense that I'm triggered today, I probably am. So it's all good. We're all a work in progress.
Okay.
But even Marie, I want to know,
Yes, we
what is the
are.
best way to develop compassion? Yes. What is the best way to develop compassion when when you are interacting with someone that does have mental illness? Because I find that for me, it's sometimes hard to see it as an illness when you cannot see it. And it's easy for me personally, I don't know about anyone else, but to take things personally when someone appears to be okay and they may have great potential or be extremely intelligent and you see them doing well in other arenas of life, but you're like, wait a minute, something doesn't add up. So how do you develop compassion and work on being so triggered?
I think that's the key word is, like you said, something doesn't add up. And so you recognize that something's wrong.
Mm.
But to develop compassion first, I think it starts with you. I think it starts with you knowing yourself, you owning yourself and where your stuff comes from, you recognizing that we are human beings, that are all flawed, we all want grace. And so it starts with that grace and that love that we give to ourselves. And as you work to give that to yourselves, it penetrates and you can give it to other people. So I like to say that really does start with self and having an understanding and grace of giving that. And then it permeates to other people.
I love that it starts with self. And
It
so
starts with
then,
self.
speaking of self, how do we set boundaries? So we've got the compassion down, we've got the grace down. How do we then set boundaries to protect ourselves when we're interacting with someone in our lives who's experiencing mental illness?
Yes, that's a tricky one too. And again, the boundaries that are set are unique to who you are. A lot of times we want to talk to our friends and other family members, and they tell them, "Well, girl, this is what I do," or "You want to do this." But really, it's again, it goes back to you knowing yourself and you knowing what is uncomfortable for you, what your tolerance is, what your life looks like, how much you can take, what season that you're in. All of that dictates what the boundaries look like with that mentally ill person. And I'll sort of give you an example. In my own life in dealing, let's say, with my mom. So, my dear, loving, wonderful mother, and I am so grateful, know that I am so grateful for my mother today. And while she has suffered and has caused a lot of suffering in my life, I no longer take it personal. I have forgiven my mom, and in setting boundaries with her, it would look like, over the years, I recognized after about, let's say, Ooh, in mom's presence after about 20 minutes, she starts to get triggered. And I realized over the years in talking with mom, I'm a trigger for her from her abuse mom, because I remind her of her mother, my disposition, how I show up, being overly responsible. My mother suffers with a mental illness and she was a child. So her capacity, her mental state is sort of like a teenager. So when I come at her, I'm coming at her like an adult. And after 20 minutes, that's too much adulting. And it triggers her. And I realized that over the years. So a boundary in knowing myself is after about 20 minutes, I know that's enough time of being in the presence with my mother. So therefore, you know what? I might visit her 15, 20 minutes. I'm taking her food. We talk for a little minute and I'm out 20 minutes. If it's a holiday, I already know I've got to prepare myself, if it's going to be an all day, of what that looks like. Otherwise, I'm going to do something different with that holiday with my mom, depending on what season. So I think that's an example of a boundary. She's older now, right? I loved her from a distance, really didn't talk to her every day, didn't need to know her everyday interaction. It was a lot for me. But now that she's older, my mom is like in her 80s, I have to check in on her. How does that look? That's healthy for me. That's just a simple, couple minute phone call every day. Hey, mom, how you doing? You okay? I know within the first 10, 15 seconds whether or not she's taking her meds. At that point, I could find out a little information. I could help troubleshoot to get her what she needs. That's the boundary. Would she like me to come over and spend a whole lot of time with her? I can't do it. My life is full, and it would drain me, beyond drain me. So I know what my limits are. I love my mother. I know what my limits are. I no longer hold that level of guilt about what I can do and what I can't do. I know what I can do, and I stay true to it, if that's an example.
That is a beautiful example. Oh, that's so perfect. Let's dive into more examples. I feel like examples, because these situations are so tricky, and so hearing someone else's perspective on how they're dealing
Yes,
with it, I think is super helpful. What about, I know for me and
yes,
the work that I've been doing on myself, one of the things that comes up is, what do you do with I want to say, the gaping hole or the void that you feel from a loved one that does have a mental illness and they don't have on their shelf what you're desiring, what you need. You might need affection and love. You might need you might feel as though you need an apology, right? But that person doesn't have the capacity to do that.
absolutely.
What are we to do with what we feel as though we're lacking because that person hasn't showed up in the way that we want them to?
Absolutely. And that's a part of the lacking, right? The lacking is is also rooted in what? The pain, the trauma of them not being there, right? And so it's a matter again of understanding, really understanding and not taking personal, um how that parent showed up, and the fact that you said it, Terry, they don't have the capacity to give you what it is that you want. And so if you stay focused on that, then you're going to continue to stay in that level of hurt and pain because you're staying focused on the deficit. And so to tell you a story, it was, again, this was a milestone for me. I guess big year was my 40th birthday and going through that midlife crisis. And, I never had thrown a party for myself. And I thought, oh, 40 is a big one. And it was somewhat painful for me because I believe it was my 40th birthday. My mom wasn't going to be there. And I don't recall why. It's either she was in the throes of either substance abuse or whatever the case would be. But I'm giving this big brunch and she wasn't going to be there. And naturally, that was painful for me. And I was focused on it. And so it was even more painful because it's like, here I'm turning 40, I've gotten here, and I still don't have my mama, right? It's painful. However, I invited a lot of people in my life that I love and that have been there. And so we're sitting at brunch. Oh my goodness. And I get up to say a speech to say thank you to everybody that had come to celebrate my life. And as I look around the room, it was the most beautiful, profound gift that God had given me. Because as I looked around the room, it was one auntie after another. Some people don't even have godmoms, and I had several, and play moms and neighbors, and it was all these mother figures that was revealed to me in that moment that I just couldn't even talk. I was just overwhelmed with what God had given me. And it was all of this wisdom, all of this caring, all of this covering, all of this showing how to be a woman, how to have character, how to walk in integrity, came from all of these beautiful women that sat there in that room with me. So it's Terri, it's about not focusing on the deficit and really looking at your life and what is in your life that is filling your life up. And I think that really does help. And I shifted from there because I saw what I really had. I embrace it.
So beautiful. I love it. Thank you for sharing that too.
Thank you. Oh, absolutely.
Yes, I love that too. I know one of the things that I usually tell my clients is that if there's a need that you're noticing, or something that you feel that you're lacking, like a mother or father figure, you can get that need met elsewhere. And while it
Yes.
may hurt, and there may be some work around the grief and the loss of not having your actual parent be the person to provide it, there are so many other ways in which you can still have that need met. And I think your example was such a beautiful, beautiful
Thank you.
example of that.
Yeah, that was a very
And
profound
so,
moment.
yeah. So, one question I do have is, how does one begin to tell if someone in their life has mental illness? Like I mentioned before, we all have moments of anxiety and depression, right?
Yes.
But how do we know that the person in our life, whether it's a parent or another loved one, is experiencing symptoms that are worthy of like a diagnosis?
Yes. So again, I think it's when we're close to people and we're around our family members and we can see their level of maybe functioning is going down. Maybe they're maybe more frustrated. Again, we're looking at their level of how they show up in the world and what they're able to do. Severe is you're not even really being able to take care of yourself. But somebody who's mild, maybe they're sad. It's like checking in on somebody. Somebody's really anxious or having panic attacks, or you might notice, or they share with you what they're going through. It's like really encouraging them. Have you seen a doctor? Even sometimes emotional health, without us taking care of it, right, will start to manifest in our body. And we think, oh, it's something physical, when really it's our stress levels that is now affecting us in our body. And so I think it's about checking in on people and seeing how they're feeling. And again, if somebody is operating very different than what you know to be, don't just ignore it. Ask them. You know. So I think that's how we know. And in children, of course, there's developmental stages, and if a child is not, performing to that stage, well, then we check in with a doctor to find out, some of what's going on. But with adults, it's a little different. And with teenagers, it's like irritability, it's isolation. You need to check in on them, find out what's going on, ask questions. And same with adults. A lot of times adults, because we don't understand mental illness so much, we try to hide it, right? Because it's a stigma, unfortunately, attached to it, and we don't want people to know. But it's like what we're
Right.
doing now is helping release that stigma. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know you talked a bit about some of the things that we can do or a perspective shift that we can have when we are focusing on what we might be lacking in
Hmm.
all actuality. We might actually have an abundance of some type of energy that we're desiring. Are there any suggestions or activities for maybe inner child work that we can do to help with that? Because I know for me, in my experience, again, this is personal, y'all. So I'm talking about my experience because that's what I know. But when it comes to inner child work, are there any activities that you can recommend when that inner child comes up and is kind of longing for those things that you've talked about, like the mother energy or the father energy, or just looking for that person that isn't there? I know you've shared some with me personally, but I'd love to kind of share it with the listeners as well.
Sure, absolutely. I definitely think definitely with inner child work, but I think if you're going to do the inner child work, I would highly recommend that you do it with a professional that can witness it, can walk you through, that can help you differentiate between that little child self versus your adult self. It's learning to love on and talk to that child self as you're being triggered from those past traumas. Journaling is very, very helpful. When those feelings or emotions or you're triggered, you can purge them, allow the paper to hold it, you sort of work it out, pen to paper. I found find that that's a really good tool. But I always like to say when you're doing that inner child work, which is really important if you've grown up with childhood trauma, do it with a professional, work with a professional. Mhm. Because you can re-traumatize yourself all over again. And I think that it's nice if you have a professional that you're working with. Mhm.
I think that that's a beautiful point there, to make sure that we do have someone with us who can bear witness and can hold that with us and can help us and guide us through that from a professional stance. And so
Absolutely.
I do
And
want to shift a little
it's
bit.
there's sort of a delay.
No worries, no worries. So I do want to shift just a little bit. So you talk about being faith-based, right? And I know earlier you mentioned that, for those of us that are mental health professionals in our training, we aren't taught to incorporate a lot of ourselves into this work. So, can you talk to
Yes.
us a little bit about how you incorporate your faith into the work that you do with clients?
Oh, absolutely. I love it. I couldn't do it any other way. And so, really, me being a faith based practitioner really means that I draw upon the belief systems of my clients to help them heal and to help them grow. It's not my faith, it's their faith that I'm drawing on. Certainly, we bring our whole selves to the room. At least I decided as a therapist or in a coach, I bring my whole self to the session. So, yes, I'm going to bring my belief system, but I'm not projecting that on my clients. They bring those. So, I see clients anywhere, I don't know, from Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Taoism, across the board, religions, denominations, wisdoms, and philosophies, right? But again, I'm drawing upon something greater than themselves to help them heal and to help them grow. And it's interesting, all these years I've been doing this work, right? I'm talking about the God I serve, and they think I'm talking about the God they serve. And I like to always say that when we boil it down, it really is the greatest is love. And that's what we're talking about. So I did I answer that as it relates to faith? Is really yeah, it's learning yourself, who you are, owning, accepting, becoming that best version. And that comes with love and compassion. So it's love. So that's how I incorporate
That's
things.
so beautiful. I love that it's not like a cookie cutter, I want to say experience for you, Eve Marie. It really is you sort of you bringing your full self, but also tailor making the experience to the particular client that you're speaking to. I think that's beautiful, and I'd love to also know what are I guess what is your favorite thing about doing this work, about diving into these potentially sensitive topics with your clients? What's your favorite thing about doing this type of work?
Oh my God. My favorite is when I see people just really get to know themselves and understand why they do what they do and where it comes from, and knowing that I'm a facilitator. My gift to this world is encouragement, it's motivation, it's inspiration, and it's helping others find those gifts within themselves. And I get to do that every single day. And the second part is in
I see
that,
that.
right? I get to operate in my gifts. I get to operate in my gifts. And I get to talk about God all day long.
Yes.
It's no greater joy.
I love that. I'm just watching the therapist connection now. You and Dr. Don, the therapist connection. I see Don shaking her head and smiling. I'm like, yes, I see it. That's so amazing to be able to do that work. It really is.
Oh, it is.
It's a
It's no greater
blessing,
joy.
it's
It is.
exactly.
Yeah.
What's one thing, Eve Marie, that you wish that your clients knew coming into the therapy process?
It's really interesting. What would I want my clients to know? My practice I decided early on, as it related to the specialty being faith-based and working with entertainment and creatives. Um, and the idea is, and I only work with, I want to say, high functioning professionals, as you will, right? And so, what would I want them to know? A lot of times, I'm that sort of like they've been to therapy, and I'm like that last therapist. So it's not so much, because I guess I'm that last therapist that I'm trying to articulate this that they would probably see, right? Because it's that maybe they've learned up to this point what their illness is, how to navigate it, and now they're at a season in their life. Maybe it's a transition in their life. Maybe the depression came back up. Maybe the anxiety is showing up, or maybe someone again is navigating relationships with other people. So there isn't really, I think that it's pretty self-explanatory when I do an intake, what I'm looking for as it relates to fit. Because I'm transparent, I can't work with certain personality disorders, because therefore I couldn't really be a transparent therapist, because it wouldn't be so helpful to the client. It's like I'm very specific as it relates to my kind of specialty, so it's not really, I don't really know how to answer that, other than I'm very specific on the clientele. And I'm teaching again a prescription for peace, how to know, own, and accept yourself. And I'm coaching you to become that better version.
That's amazing, I wanna say, and we talk a lot about boundaries on the podcast, and so I don't think I ever recall chatting with a therapist, who was so specific about the type of person that they were looking to attract. I see that in other realms of, different professions, but when I had a chance to read your information and work with you, Eve Marie, I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." That's amazing to be able to set a standard for how and who you wanna work with and what type of energy you're gonna be engaging with all day, so I think that's really inspiring. It can be inspiring for all of us when it comes to boundaries and really
Right.
cultivating what type of energy do I want to attract, even in the professional setting, right?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, I could totally understand that, and I do think, you did answer that question beautifully in terms of,
Okay.
what you want your clients to know is you are specific on the type of
Yes.
person that you bring in. And
Yes.
and so that means that some people are not going to be a good fit. And
Correct.
that's okay, and that's a part of life. Life wouldn't be this beautiful thing that it is if everybody was a good fit for everybody.
Correct.
And so
Correct. There's many, many
and so
therapists and
Eve
many,
Marie,
many
we have
specialties.
exactly. And we have one more final question for you.
Okay.
What is the one question that you wished people would ask you more often?
What is the question that I would want people to ask me more often? I don't know. I think that when it comes to my practice, really trying to help people find their place of peace. I think a lot of times people get caught in the details of their life, and I take it to the higher level of looking at really where it is you want to go, And so maybe if people would ask me more of what is my prescription for peace, or how do I get to know myself, you know what I mean? Certainly that's my practice and I'm helping people do that, but a lot of times that's not what they're coming or what they think they're coming for. That's always my agenda, and it tends to work out well.
That is a very, very good point there. And I will say, we want to thank you so much, Eva Marie, for just spending time with us. We appreciate your patience with our technical difficulties as well. I'm glad we were able to still get the
Oh,
conversation done, even though we
absolutely.
had some technical difficulties. Yes, we really appreciate you. And we'd love to let folks know where they can find you, how they can learn more about your practice and your work, and potentially book a session with you.
I Where they can find me? You want me to share where they can find me? Oh, absolutely. So my practice is Eve's Place of Peace. And all you have to do is Google Eve's Place of Peace, and Eve Marie comes up. My website comes up, and I have all my contact information on there. And really, my practice is, I've been in the pursuit of peace, like I said, for over 40 years, and that's why it's Eve's Place of Peace. So that's what I'm here to help people find their prescription for peace, because it makes for a very joyful life.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Eva Marie. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.